Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Dr. Sian Proctor. I'm a geoscience professor at a community college in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm also an explorer and an analog astronaut. And so I have spent the last 21 years teaching at the community college, and I teach classes like geology, I teach um, sustainability, I also teach environmental science and planetary science, planetary geology. And so that's been
Mm.
very rewarding. But my undergrad degree is in environmental science. My master's is in geology, and then my PhD is in curriculum instruction with an emphasis in science education. And so about 10 years ago, I transitioned from just being a geology professor as my main thing to also having this dual identity as an analog astronaut. And so I have my analog astronaut shirt on for today. And so
Yeah.
an analog astronaut is someone who engages in human spaceflight training, but on Earth. So whether that's in the air, in land, living in analogs, or under the sea, doing
Mm.
aquanaut stuff, analog
Mm.
astronauts has really exploded in the last decade. The early places where you could go and be an analog astronaut were places like the Mars Desert Research Station in Utah or FMARS up in Canada, even Antarctica as an analog for Mars or the Moon. But in the recent decade, now there's places all around the world. There's probably 20, 25 analog sites all over the place.
Mm.
And some of the more notable ones are the hi-seas habitat on the Big Island of Hawaii. So I was part of the very first crew to live in the hi-seas habitat. I lived there for 4 months investigating food strategies for long duration space flight. And that was funded specifically by NASA to look at food strategies. And then I've also lived in the Mars Desert Research Station for 2 weeks. I've lived in the Lunaris habitat in Pila, Poland for 2 weeks. And then I've also lived again back at the hi-seas habitat in the beginning of 2020 in January before COVID kind of took over. I lived there with the very first all-female crew. And
Mm.
so I've been an analog astronaut for the last 7 years, eight to 7 years. And then before that, I was a finalist for the astronaut selection process in 2009. So I went through their selection process and got down to the finals, where it was a yes no phone call. And so that was a really good experience. So I definitely wanted to be an astronaut growing up and in space. Then I kind of stopped having that dream around 16 or 17. Well, actually, 17, I'd say, is when I stopped thinking I could be an astronaut. And then uh, I kind of just went off and did my thing. I got my degrees in science because I love science and technology, got a minor in mathematics, things like that. But when I got my full time job, at the community college, that's when I really started exploring and traveling and teaching around the world. I've been to 50 different countries around the world. I've been to all 50 states. And so, really developing into an explorer. I got my pilot's license, I got my scuba certification, just living my life. And then in 2008, somebody said, NASA's looking for astronauts, you should apply. And it kind of brought that childhood dream back. But I didn't even know how you became an astronaut. And so I looked at the qualifications when that person sent me that note, and I realized that the life I had been living was the type of life that NASA is interested in for their astronauts. And that is being an explorer, being a lifelong learner, pushing myself in extreme ways with learning to fly, learning to scuba dive, hiking, mountaineering, extreme environments, things like that. And so so it just happened that those two things aligned or became parallel in my life. And then when I got the no phone call for being an astronaut from Sunita Williams, um, I transitioned over to becoming an analog astronaut. And so now, because I'm more on the older side, NASA is not necessarily in the cards for me when it comes to becoming an astronaut, but that doesn't mean that my desire to go to space is any less. It will probably end up being, if I do end up going, it would be on the commercial side in some capacity. So I'm still trying to develop my skills and my knowledge and create opportunity for myself in that sector while still being a community college professor at in Phoenix for my job.
Yeah. Okay. Don't you feel difficulty about having a lot of titles that you work on? Because you are a geo scientist and also space chef and also analog astronaut, and I also heard that you are a traveler and like you
Yeah.
are pilot. I don't know. Isn't it difficult for you to manage these all things? And
Well,
also, finally, actually, I saw that you are drawing like space arts.
oh yes, space
You're,
artist.
I loved your
That's
paintings
my
as
proudest
well.
title is my space
Yeah,
art.
yeah, yeah.
You know, the
You
thing about
are,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. You are really the best, one of the best sample of a team, like adding the art into the STEM.
Oh yeah,
You are a
I
good
definitely am
sample
a
for
big
that.
fan of that, of having the arts. I think it's really important, but also it's that lifelong learning mentality, always pushing myself to take on new challenges. Now, some of the things that you mentioned title-wise are skills, like being a pilot. You know, it's something that I'm not current on, but it's a box that I checked. I always wanted to become a pilot, so I got my pilot's
Yeah.
license. I learned that it's easier to get your pilot's license than it is to maintain your pilot's license because of the expense, but and getting scuba certified and things like that. But and then even cooking and becoming a space chef and learning to cook with freeze-dried fruits, meats, and vegetables. Uh, those are things that are skills that you kind of come into and you weave out of. Now, and then being able to travel and be an explorer. I mean, all of these things take work and energy, but also money and access to some extent. I've been fortunate that a lot of my exploration has come through being a geoscience professor. So that has opened up because geoscience professors study the world. They study
Yeah.
Earth processes. So
Mm.
if you want to be a traveler, I always say, well, become a geoscientist. The Earth
Mm.
is your laboratory. And so that I've been very fortunate because of that to be able to do that aspect. So there are the things that I have to personally push myself for to gain those titles, and then there's the things that opportunity comes because of job or access and stuff like that. But it's really important to think about what titles are the ones that you want to wear and are most important. And so when I think of myself and I introduce myself now, being a geoscientist is important to me because I worked really hard education wise, and it's what I've done for the last 25 years. I'm a geoscientist, but the explorer is what I really want to be known as. Analog astronaut, yeah, that's great, but I want to be known more as an explorer. When people think of me, or they're thinking of, who's a top Black female explorer out there, I want them to think of me. And that would be nice. And I do that, and I want that to attain that title through being an analog astronaut and through my hiking and through my science communication and how that appears. And then the newest one is the space artist. I've always wanted to do art. And so figuring out my specific artistic expression has been a lifelong goal that is just now being realized.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, when we are exploring space, also we see everything is already moving. So after I see this, everything is moving around the space, I thought that, uh, well, everything is moving. Why we are stopping somewhere and we are not trying to develop ourselves? It's really out of our reality. We should move too. We should improve ourselves and try, actually. When we try many things, we can find what is really close to us and find our identity. I think so.
Hmm.
And uh, really, I previously also studied for being a pilot for Turkish airline, but because of COVID, the procedure stopped there. So even if I couldn't, but really, I still find some mutual points with me and you. That is, maybe we can meet at the point of geoscientists and maybe analoging, because really after I came up with the space architecture, I found that I really have to learn very much about space geology, the land of it, the surface and the material and everything. And I have to, after creating my space architectural projects, I have to analog it on the Earth, maybe in the some places that are closer to maybe Mars and Moon space.
Yeah, you know,
And
that's really great because, well, space
yeah,
architecture is a really fantastic area. It's a developing area, and the nice thing about analogs is that they can be done anywhere. And so
mm,
you can look at where the Mars Desert Research Station is sitting, and it's really in layered sedimentary rocks. And versus the hi-sies habitat sits on volcanic rock, and so and Mars has both of those, and so and what's great about analog research and analog stations is that they can be put anywhere, and that's why I loved
mm,
going to Poland and participating in theirs. And then in there's one in Israel, and then there's one in Brazil, and there are all of these analogs that people just like you are creating in their country and starting to have people live in them. And so you could start one in Turkey and
yeah,
design it and lay it
yeah,
out and all of that stuff. And that would be amazing.
yeah. That will be. I hope that we can do. Not yet. We don't have yet, I think. And I wonder about the procedures that you came across when you became an analog astronaut. Just randomly it happened, or what kind of inspiration you had to come to that point, and after that, what you have done there? And
You mean that when I learned about becoming an analog astronaut?
yeah, yeah.
It was random. Again, I've got friends who like to send me things because they know I'll sign up for them. And so a friend sent me a note saying that NASA was looking for people to live in an analog habitat for 4 months, investigating food. And my friend was like, "You love food and you love space. You should apply." And had she not sent me that, I never would have even known that existed. And so it
Mm,
really was about, one of the ways that you create opportunity for yourself is by letting people know the things that you're passionate about. So when they see opportunities, they think of you and they send them to you.
mm,
And so she sent me that and I applied. And the next thing I know, I'm living in a Mars simulation for 4 months. And so you've
mm,
got to be able to have the information, there for you. But then now I know people who either reach out to me and I send them, or there's websites. And now with the internet and stuff even more populated, you can Google just about anything and learn more. And so access to information has never been greater. There's also a lot of junk out there, but there's a lot of really good stuff. And so I know somebody who's building their own habitat dome in their backyard, and then I know somebody that also built their own habitat dome in their backyard to live like an analog astronaut. And so
mm,
all kinds of opportunities to do something unique in that space and contribute to human spaceflight, wherever you are.
Mm, yeah, it's a very significant point that you said. Let people to know about your passions. In the beginning, really, I was really like a silent person. I was hiding myself from people, but then I did like this actually. I let people to know about me, what kind of thing I like, I don't like. But then I feel like, am I doing something wrong? But finally, as you said, actually, you confirmed that point. That's keep going, keep introducing ourselves to people who are really searching people. Okay.
Yeah, it's really important to do that, but also to, and then find the people who inspire you, bring out the best in you, and become allies and friends with those people, because that just fuels you. Find other people who have the same passions as you do, because when you have conversations with it, you both leave inspired.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I found you and am I having conversation with you? That's great. And I wanted to know that what kind of activities you have done at analog astronaut days, let's say.
Yeah, a typical it depends on where you're going and what type of habitat is set up. And so the high seas habitat, I like it because as a geologist, there's a lot of um, going out into the field, doing EVAs, extravehicular activities, where you get to put on a spacesuit and you get to go and climb across the geologic rock and you get
Mm.
to go into lava tubes and investigate. And so that's one of the more fun activities for me being a geologist is getting out into the field, um, making observations and learning about the terrain, mapping, things like that. Also, the engaging with some of the technology like rovers and drones. I really enjoy being able to, drive mechanical objects across terrains or fly because a pilot. I really love flying drones. And so
Mm.
that's another thing that you can do if it's in the right type of analog situation. Then a lot of some of the other things are looking at research that I've been involved in has been crew cohesion, food and mood, um, how ways in which you can relax as an astronaut, to reduce stress, how you communicate with your crewmates, uh, also some of the biological aspects of, microbiology of living in a habitat and how that changes over time, exercise activities and working out. It's so, do you work out as an individual? Do you work out as a crew? Scheduling. So these are all kinds of things to think about when it comes, and of course, food and the type of food you eat, when you eat, how much you eat, uh, communication, all kinds of things. Everything that you can think about when it comes to living are the same things that are going to apply in that analog situation. But then you have the research behind it, and thinking about the research you want to focus on. And so if you're a space architect coming into that, then you might be thinking about habitat design and functionality. And if you're an engineer, you might be thinking about systems and energy and power usage, because that's also logged. And so how much energy are you using? Where is that energy coming from? Are you managing that energy? So things like that.
Yeah, yeah. And did you take your PPL? Let's say it's PPL that you took for piloting. It's a
BPL.
personal license, right?
Yeah, I have my private's license, my
Yeah, yeah.
private pilot's license.
Mm, I see. Uh,
And
recently I have a friend that maybe you know her, Bailey
oh
Burns.
yeah,
She's
Bailey.
also, yeah,
Yeah,
she
Bailey.
also
I would say that
now at
I'm a
analog.
bit of Bailey's mentor. Bailey's at high
Oh,
seas right now. Yeah,
oh yeah, yeah. She went at the
yeah,
same place, I think, Big Island in
yeah.
Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We,
I'm the one who encouraged her to apply to that.
yeah, really. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. A few weeks ago, we talked to her as well. I
Yep,
hope
she's
to
part of
listen.
Project Possum. We're both we were both part of the
Oh,
same Project Possum class, and we were
mm.
roommates. So
Oh,
yeah, and so
I
that's
see.
how I know Bailey, and so we've been friends ever since. But there's a big age gap between us.
Mm.
So she's at the beginning of her career. I'm at the transition of mine, and so I give her nuggets of wisdom.
I see. We guys need such kind of mentors, actually. Okay.
Yeah, mentorship
Okay.
is really important. And so checking in on her, making sure she had what she needed before going to hi-sies, since I've been there twice. In fact, her vice commander and commander are friends of mine. I have worked with both of them. And so being able to give her some advice and some knowledge before she went, so it's not completely new.
Yeah. Do you think are there any differences between the places which are providing analog astronomy land? Is there any difference between them about quality or education and so on?
You mean like the habitats, analog locations themselves?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there are differences, and that's why it's fun to go and see what they are. And that changes over time. So I haven't been back to the Mars Desert Research Station in 8 years. So I'm sure that it's changed in
Mm,
ways. And so going back to the high seas habitat, it was
mm,
7 years. I went in 2013, and then I went back in 2020. So it had changed, and looking at their upgrades and improvements.
mm,
But depending on, like, Lunaris was a situation where it's a hangar, so you're on a crater in the moon, so your habitat location, and then going out on EVAs, you don't actually go outside, you go into a moonscape that's in a hangar. And so different from going to, so you're in darkness, very
mm,
different than going to high seas where you're out and about in the terrain on the side of a big gigantic volcano at 8,000 feet. And then again, when you go out, and all of that is hiking, where you're actually
mm,
just physically, so no road, no four-wheeled vehicles or anything like that. Whereas then you go to the Mars Desert Research Station in Utah and you have ATVs. So you get to
mm,
go out on ATVs across the landscape. So three
mm,
very different analogs when it comes to your experiences as an EVA. Going out into a
mm,
dark crater that's all enclosed within a hangar, going out across the landscape of high seas, volcanic, but walking, and then going to the Mars Desert Research Station where you have the sedimentary terrain, but you also have ATVs, and you can take them out and drive across the landscape. So
mm.
it's very cool
Yeah,
to experience those different things.
yeah, yeah. I understand. And really want to ask this question, even it's not real, but still want to ask. If you had been chosen for being the first woman on Moon or Mars, but unless you will not come back, would you go?
That's a good question, because it could be a reality, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, I if as I get older, that question becomes yes. And then, because I'm getting closer to the end of my natural life anyways. I mean, that there's that whole idea of how long are you going to live? We don't know. Um, but the guarantee is that the older I get, the closer I am to that possible end. And so, at being 50 now, I can see myself, when we're going to put boots on Mars, I'll be in my 60s probably. And
Mm,
so if people are like, we're looking for some older people with some skills to send to Mars. Now, if you're not going to come back, do you still want to go? okay,
Yeah.
why not? I gotta die somewhere. And so I think but for younger people, I actually think we should send to Mars the first people to Mars, older people in their 60s and 70s who have the skill set and cognitive capacity to take on that challenge, because because of the radiation, because of the inherent risk and all of that stuff. So why wouldn't you want your trailblazers to be people who know that, your chances of coming back aren't going to be necessarily very high? And if the radiation exposure, but if you're 70, you know, but if you're 20 or 30, there's a lot of risk there.
Mm. Because of these all hazardous things on the space, I was always thinking that really the people who wants to go there and still they will not be able to come back. I thought that they are really crazy. Why they leave this beautiful Earth and going into a big radiation effect
Yeah.
and like a land, very dry land, no clean water. So what's going on with these guys?
Yeah. You
So,
know, it is a extreme exploration. And that what's interesting about that is that given the choice, I'm a geo explorer, I'm a geoscientist, so I love the Earth. Number one, there's no better planet. We already know
oh
that,
yeah.
people. There's no place like home. But number
Mm,
two, to go to the moon and come back. Now that would be amazing.
mm,
Or even low Earth orbit. So you're going up for just a short period of time and then you're coming back. But Mars is a whole different animal, because you're going away for a long time and your ability to come back isn't necessarily guaranteed. And so that is really mentally, you have to be in a whole different mindset to go to that extreme. Whereas
mm,
the moon is a lot more. We've sent people to the moon, so we know we can do it. We know we can bring people back successfully. It's 3 days away. I mean, there's just, it's safer. But the next
mm,
leap is Mars, and it'll
mm,
be interesting to see who they choose to send there. And I won't
yeah.
be surprised if the first mission is just to go and orbit around Mars and then head back, just to proof of concept. We can get there, we can bring you back. You won't step on Mars, but then the next one, how do we get people to land there? But we have robotics, and
Mm,
robotics will help put us, you set up stuff there. And the moon is going to be the proving ground for Mars. And so we're going to learn how to live successfully. Just like we've learned to live successfully in low Earth orbit, we're going to learn to live successfully on the moon. And what's interesting about that is that as we do that, we'll learn to ship things from the moon to Mars. And it'll be really fascinating to see that evolution. And it makes me excited for the next 40 to 50 years of my life, what will be accomplished.
mm,
And I like the idea of being a part of that.
mm. I have one personal question actually. It's about me.
Yeah.
Well, after I decided to continue my academy on space architecture, but after that I thought that how many projects we can do on Moon or Mars. Is it? I thought myself that is it a wrong choice for me I'm doing? Will I be unemployed in the future about in the field? Because maybe I thought like that maybe or 10 space architects will be enough for designing Mars and Moon designs like habitats. Do you think this I will have this problem in the future?
No, because solving for space solves for Earth. So if you're a space architect, everything that you do is applicable to Earth. And so
Mm,
you building better habitats for the moon and Mars means building better habitats here on Earth.
mm,
And so you can make your mark in both locations.
yeah.
It's not exclusive one or the other. And it's just how you choose to frame that narrative for yourself. And so if you decide that you're going to be a space architect who creates amazing, takes that technology that is being developed, that cutting edge technology, to make living spaces in Turkey or around the world better. Think about how powerful that is. You
Mm.
know, it's space architecture, and is all about efficiency in shelter and living. So you've got power management, you've got water management, you've got environmental management, all built into it, so that we can not only survive in that extreme environment of space, but also thrive there. Well, how do you can take all of that and you can apply that to Earth and be a really amazing architect here too.
Really, it's very great answer. It's satisfied me. And I will not turn back from this title. It made me really strong now.
Yeah, because it's not, they go together. And so if people are like, space architect, what are you doing? And you just say, look, solving for space solves for Earth. Everything that I'm doing
Uh,
there as a space architect will make us more efficient and better here on our planet. And you might just live in one of my habitats here on Earth.
mm, yeah, yes. Yesterday I just rewatched the Interstellar film. I watched a lot of times. So in that film, when they said, okay, yeah, NASA didn't go to moon, it's like a fake thing. They were talking about this, and they didn't want to the kids to interest in space. So the man, I forgot his name, who went to space. So he said that uh, we have developed a lot of technology on the Earth because of the space exploration, space work. So
Yeah.
really, I rethink again. Uh, really, space made us develop on this Earth more
Mhm.
than if we don't explore the Mars
Well,
or
yeah.
in space.
Everything we do for space is done on Earth. Like
Yes, right.
everything we built, everything that we've sent up there, all of the people, it's all from here.
Yeah.
So everything we do, space is all Earth based. And
Mm.
then at least for right now, and so it's it does apply. It is relevant, and it does make a difference.
Mm. Yeah.
Here on Earth, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was mentioned about interstellar film and other space films actually. Do you advise any other films that, like, maybe
Well,
films
Contact.
or books that you can advise for us?
Well, I think that Contact is one of the best, books and films out there. And funny enough, Interstellar and Contact both have Matthew McConaughey in it. So, but what is great about Contact is it's a movie really more about faith than it is about anything else. And at the end, whether what you believe in, and whether or not you believe she had that experience or not, and her ability to believe in things that you cannot necessarily explain or prove, and are they just as valid as the ones that we can? And so it's interesting from a scientific standpoint to watch that movie and think about what we perceive as our reality and the things that we want to do as a species, and how we communicate that and bring others along on that journey. And so that's
Mm.
one of my favorite movies, Contact. um, I really like The Expanse, because The Expanse does the series, and it's also a set of books. And so I've been reading, or actually I've been listening to the audiobooks of The Expanse and then watching the series. And I love that idea of, what the future would look like if we successfully inhabit not only Earth, but the moon, Mars, the asteroid belt, and beyond. And
Yeah.
that's exciting. That's really futuristic.
Yeah.
And then I like
And
Stargate. I like Stargate Sg1. It's not on anymore. It was a TV show, 10 series on the Sci-Fi Channel. But that was just a really fun idea of thinking about interstellar travel to other worlds that happen to be populated, and brings in the mythology of our own world and cultures and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. And really, I want to also know a little bit about space food. What kind of ingredients? I don't know what kind of cooking it is.
Well,
What is the specialty of them?
Well, you know, the thing about it is space food is really anything that has become shelf-stable for a certain amount of time, because you don't want your food going bad. And so how do you not only make it shelf stable, but also reduce your chances of, contamination, because you don't want to get sick in space. And so the biggest thing now is the freeze dried technology. So, and again, this goes into thinking about how we preserve things on Earth, and food. How do we preserve our food here, whether it's dehydrated or whether freeze dried, um, or any other kind of way of reducing that microbial growth because you're taking out the water or you're mitigating the water in some way. So freeze-dried technology has allowed us to take 98% of the water out of pretty much almost all the food out there, and while still leaving the texture and shape and most of the nutrients. And so that means that now you can actually create a meal like they do for the ISS, a full meal like spaghetti and meatballs or whatever, and then you make it, prepare it, and then you freeze dry it. And so you suck the water out of it, and then it's packaged, and sealed, so reduced microbial growth, all of that. You don't have to worry about that stuff. And then it's lightweight because 98% of the water has been taken out. Easier to ship to space. You ship it to space, they hydrate it there. They heat and hydrate, and now they have this delicious meal with all the nutrients and things that they want to eat. Now, the thing
Mm.
about that's the way it's working for microgravity. But when it comes to Mars, and to some extent Moon also, but the Moon, has a tenth of the Earth's gravity, whereas Mars has a third. And so you got gravity, you can creatively cook on Mars. And so now, instead of having that meal of its components all put together on Earth and then shipped up, you can actually ship the components all in freeze dried form and then creatively cook. And that adds, a little more cultural significance to our experience when we think about long duration space flight, because we
Yeah.
can creatively cook and bring our culture with us, and share that, in a way where, instead, I mean, you could bring it with you in a freeze dried already prepared meal, but there's something about me taking ingredients, mixing them together, having that creativity, and being able to present it to you to share with me. And
Mm.
so that's part of the research behind food, and not only food, but also mood. How do you feel?
Yeah.
I have a research experiment. It's not research, it's an art project on with Bailey at
Yeah.
hi-sies right now, which is a food and mood project where they're going through and they're charting for me their daily food, but also their mood of the day. And so it'll be fun to get that back.
I see. Yeah. And so, what about the psychology of astronauts that, well, they eat these things? Do they really like to eat it, or just they have to eat it?
No, I think the food is getting to the point where they like eating it. They get to test a lot of the
Oh.
food, and they make their menu before they go up, which is nice. And so they know to some extent what to expect. What they don't know is how the fluid shifts in their, you know, body will affect that sense of taste and smell. But they're eating food that they, you know, it's freeze dried and it's already packaged and prepared, but they like it enough. It's come a long way. Let's just say food has come a long way since the tube in a toothpaste that Yuri Gagarin had to like squeeze into his mouth. So, and it's only getting better.
Yeah, but maybe they will not be able to take the real taste of the food there, what it's prepared for them in a difficult situation, maybe with a big challenge, because as you know that even when we get an airplane to move another city, when we eat something there, there is something different, taste different, maybe less salty or not oily. We feel like there is something wrong here.
Right.
So the extremely they feel it. What about it?
Well, you
They
know,
don't.
that, I mean, that brings up a good point. You know, when other people prepare your meal, it's never necessarily, and it's packaged and freeze dried and rehydrated. It's never quite the same as something that's going to be cooked from scratch, that you prepared exactly to your taste and your liking. And so, and that's part of the challenge, right? And so you
Yeah.
have to, um, you have to adjust to that. Maybe I should plug it in so that I'll take you with me as I get my I got to get my cord and plug it in, as you can see down here. So let me grab this and then bring it back up with me. Oh, so we don't disappear. So now,
Yeah. And okay, if you have finished it with this question, I want to pass the next one.
okay.
Well, actually, I really, all in all, really, I think that the food, space food, is already healthier than the food on Earth. Sometimes
It
we get
can
used
be.
to eat fast foods and something we don't
Yes.
care because we do it every time. We don't care, but it's very special menu for spacewalkers.
It's
And
really controlled for, you know, the nutrients too. And you
yeah,
know what we don't do a good job here on Earth is some of the nutrients, because we have choice, a lot more choices, and these meals aren't designed for us, and we're not, our health, we're doing our own health monitoring. We don't have someone like NASA monitoring our health for us. We tend to make poor decisions. Like, I'm terrible with my salt intake, and that would never fly on the International Space Station. They don't, you
mm,
know, and so that's one of the things where I have to be mindful for myself. And when you're talking about that food being healthier, yeah, because they know exactly how much sodium, and they know exactly what you were getting as an astronaut on a daily basis, what you're taking in, and how it's the macronutrients and the micronutrients are, you know, optimized for you and your health. And now what's interesting is that there are food, prepackaged food meals that are trying to do that for you. Elements is one of the companies that I work with, and Go Get Your Elements, it's called. And so you can Google that, Go Get Your Elements. And it is freeze-dried, prepackaged meals that try to control for those micro and macronutrients so that, you know, they taste good and they're healthy for you, and they're designed for athletes and high performance, people who are engaging in high performance activities like an astronaut.
yeah. Do you think that is it really good enough about space foods? I mean, uh, mm, how to say? Um, when we want to develop something in our work like space cooking, do you take feedbacks from the astronauts who tested the food there and then develop it, or what kind of procedures, ways, methods do you follow?
No. So, all of my space chef and cooking stuff is for me for fun. And so
I
it's
see.
not something that I do active research on. I'm not a
Mm.
nutritionist and all of that stuff. And I actually am not. So I went into the high seas habitat as a research subject for
Mm.
NASA and not as a research scientist for them. And then
I see.
after that experience of learning how to interact with freeze-dried fruits, meats, and vegetables, I wrote my cookbook, Meals for Mars, based on that experience. And now
Mm.
I do a Meals for Mars test kitchen for kids every week where we're
Mm.
just having fun in the kitchen. But for me, I have a whole set of freeze-dried fruits, meats, and vegetables in my pantry at home where I get to try and creatively cook for myself,
Mm.
and I try new things, and
Mm.
it's all about me just experimenting in that realm. And so none of that goes back to NASA or any of that.
Yeah. I want to ask a question. Okay, I want to ask two questions actually in one question.
Okay.
mm, could you please tell us what was the best activity you have done at Analog Astronaut program, and what is the best food, space food for you?
Yeah, good
Your
questions.
favorite
Okay.
one?
So, that's a good question. What I would say is that doing EVAs into lava tubes is the best experience while wearing a spacesuit. It doesn't get any better than that. I want to dress up and I want to be like an astronaut. So, anytime we put on a space suit and go and tromp across, volcanic lava into lava tubes, sign me up. That is by far, that's why I love going back to hi-sies, because it provides that geologic terrain that I love and enables me to explore in that way. And so that that's definitely why I like being an analog astronaut, is the EVAs. And then the best meal that I've had, well, in 2013, when I was cooking, doing my Meals for Mars cookbook, the one of my favorites was the Moroccan beef tagine that we made. That was really good. And then the other one was the chicken enchilada soup. I really enjoyed that. Those are two that kind of came off as my favorites. But we also made really good wraps, and we did a lot of really fun, creative things. I think at home, when it comes to cooking, I love my space tacos. And so,
Yeah,
anytime you can do space tacos or space pizza, it's a win. And so thinking of ways to do that. But I do a lot of soups and stews using freeze-dried fruits, meats, and, well, not fruits, but meats and vegetables. Soups and stews,
yeah,
tacos. Yeah.
yeah. Included a lot of colors I see on you. Yeah. Um, as a geoscientist, what would you like to advise to a space architect? I mean, about geological land.
Well, I think that
Just
anything you can do that incorporates the natural landscape in the architectural design and takes advantage of what the landscape has to offer, then you're doing amazing work. I think, artists like Frank Lloyd Wright did that. Do you know Frank Lloyd Wright?
yes, I know.
Yeah. So, well, his Tellison West is in Arizona. And so
Yeah.
it's in Scottsdale. So one of his
Mm.
places that he lived and worked is here. And so I've been to Falling Waters in Pennsylvania, which was a beautiful one, where he really thought about the landscape and how the architect and the landscape enhance each other. So when you're thinking
Mm.
about space architecture on the moon and Mars, how do you incorporate the landscape and the resources that are around there, that but also provide a habitat that allows people to survive and thrive. And so thinking about the light and thinking about the radiation shield, but also
Mm.
how the lunar regolith or the Mars regolith can can be used as building materials, can be used to add, you know, any kind of aesthetic, then that's interesting. Because you think about if you have to put an build in a lava tube, and so how do you do that? But yet also you bring in, if Mars, and you're already dealing with the distance of Mars and the lack of the same amount of sunlight coming in, and you know, we're so used to having sunlight, and so how do you help either with artificial lighting or being able to enhance some of the lighting that you would be able to access?
What are some extreme differences between the Earth and space lands about when we are erecting a building there? Like maybe gravity is the main thing. What other
Well,
things?
less gravity, so you gotta, but you still gotta build your foundation, right? And you gotta anchor your structure so that you know, you do have gravity, so it's not like it's gonna float away if you don't. But it's again thinking about how to set that foundation, but you don't have some of the other things, like weather is different and your atmospheric pressure is not the same. You know, you're talking about null atmospheric pressure on the moon, and then a very small amount on Mars. And so the things when it comes to weather, but you do have to mitigate against dust storms. So in the Southwest, we have the haboobs, which are the dust storms that roll through, and Mars, you're going to have that. And so how do you seal a place? The biggest thing is that the moon, the lunar regolith, is sharp. It's glassy. It's very bad. It gets into things, and it's destroys places. And so you think about the habitat and how do you keep that material out, and if it gets in, how do you mitigate against the hazards that it will create? So it's different in those kinds of things versus on Earth, we mitigate it from a structural standpoint, all of the geohazard, you know, the weather, we have to mitigate against earthquakes, we have to mitigate against, you know, ground settling, so all of those kinds of things. Whereas, you know, on Moon or Mars, you can get different hazards.
Yeah. You know what I learned in architecture actually? When you set the regolith, there is sharper like a glass, very hazard. But you know, in architecture, we don't get everything like it can be a harm for us. Maybe it can be a positive thing as well. Maybe that material will be used in another one and another way, and that will be an amazing explore, a new find. You know?
Right, you can imagine taking that volcanic glass and melting it somehow into an amorphous structure that binds or helps to bind in a unique way, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, like the land itself is very cold. So also the ice buildings. Let's say what's an ice building like. The habitat is covered with the ice, so the ice is protecting human from the radiation actually.
Thinking
Itself,
about ways to use water or ice. Water is a good shield.
While the being in a cold place is a negative, but also a positive thing maybe.
Definitely. I actually have another meeting, so I have to go. But it's been
it's time. It's time up already with us. I'm very thankful to you for giving us this day, your time. Thanks a lot.
So lots to think about. And please, if you decide to build an analog, let me know. And it'd be fun to kind of watch the progress, and good luck with your master's in space architecture. It's a good decision. Getting my master's was the